we're going to talk about League One. And at the top of League One, there is a heavy favourite. Is it based on the size of the club? Is it based on their team? Is it based on their manager? Is it based on the takeover, Tom? Sunderland are 7-2 with black type standout. They are favourites to win League One. Do you think that's fair enough?
I just don't. I'm not sure there are any favourites in this division. I think Sunderland are it goes without saying, they're by far and away the biggest club in that division. Probably one of the biggest if they were back in the Championship. I mean, they're huge, but there are so many variables, so many things that we don't know. Yeah. But the new owners have done well so far in terms of PR, from a PR point of view. Like they do a lot of the fan podcasts, and they've obviously changed the seats and all that kind of thing. Yeah. They're getting the fans on side, but what really matters is how they'll play. Jack Ross is someone who comes with a big reputation. Lots of clubs were looking to him. I think he had an interview at Ipswich, and so maybe it's quite a coup for him. But again, he's someone who hasn't worked in English football before, so how's that going to go? And then the amount of ins and outs. I mean, obviously they had to make a lot of changes. Bear in mind, first of all, how the team had failed over the last couple of years, but how much money some of these players were on. So it is time for some fresh thinking. But how quick will that gel? I don't really see anyone out of the signings they've made who makes you go, whoa, they're going to absolutely tear up this league. They could definitely. I mean, it's a long season. It might, you think of like a Newcastle again, but not to make comparisons with Sunderland and Newcastle, but when they went down to the Championship under Rafa, they lost the first couple of games. With 46 games, you get time to turn it around. Blackburn last year had a slow start, didn't they? But still, I think when you just look at the squad, it doesn't. When you looked at the Blackburn squad or Newcastle squad in the Championship, you thought, well, this will turn it around. It's that good. I'm not quite sure I see the same thing when it comes to Sunderland. But it wouldn't surprise me if they were in the mix, but I just don't think they're a definite favourite.
I mean, it makes this a very interesting market then, if you're happy to not draw a line through, but happy to maybe swerve the short price favourite. Where are you looking elsewhere then for teams who could feasibly go up?
Well, let's just have a look at the ones that are. So just tell me through the ones that are heavily favoured.
So next up, we've got Barnsley, who not many incomings, but not many outgoings either. Yeah. 17-2. Charlton are 14-1. Pompey 14-1. Peterborough 16s. Luton 16s. Scunthorpe 20s. It's an open market, really.
So looking at that, so if we start with Charlton, for example, again, Lee Bowyer had a pretty good impact back in the last season. He's brought in a bit more experience, but he's also lost the likes of McGuinness. Not that he was particularly crucial to the way he played, it was more under Carl Robinson. But again, it's someone who had a good impact, but long term, we're not sure. Portsmouth haven't done that much business. You would expect more with Kenny Jackett. He's very accomplished at this level, so they're not a bad shout. Peterborough, as always, changed their whole squad. And there are loads of really exciting signings coming in. But we said that about a lot of players that they've brought in before, and some come off, some don't, and whether they all gel as a team, difficult. Whereas maybe looking at someone like Burton, who weren't even on that list, for the sheer fact that they're always overlooked, always underestimated, and yes, they did get relegated last season, but they weren't far off in the end. They've kept largely a lot of their same squad. Nigel Clough is someone who's got bags of experience at all levels, but League One as well, having worked there with Burton before and Sheffield United, in a chairman in Ben Robinson who fully trusts him, who will not make any rash decisions, and nor will Nigel Clough, even if there are bad results for a while. And then you look at someone like Liam Boyce, who was very sadly injured at the start of last season, for most of the season, and having watched a few of those games at the back end of last season when he was back fit, particularly the win against Bolton, I was at that match. Just the sheer impact, his energy, his way he held the ball up, creating chances. I fancy him to score quite a few goals if he can stay fit, and Burton to be not a bad shout. Burton
are 28-1, best price to win the league. Promotion, they are going to be a little bit shorter than that at 8-1. So you can see that as short as 5-1 elsewhere. So someone else agrees with you that they're too big in the trading rooms. Make sure, as ever, to check Odds Checker before having your bet, to make sure if you're backing them at 5s and 8s is available, then you should have used us. Again, now we're going to slide down the table and look at the relegation market. If you say Oxford, I'll be very upset. An interesting little fact for you, though, that no promoted team from League Two has been relegated out of League One for the last 8 years.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah. Doesn't surprise me.
But it surprises the market.
Well,
who have Accrington 13-8 favourites for the drop, Wickham 9-5, a lot shorter elsewhere. Both of those two. Gillingham 15-8, Walsall 2-1, AFC Wimbledon just over the 5-2 mark. If you can confidently say, do you think that Accrington and Wickham are going to stay up? There has to be some decent value around.
Actually, I changed what I said a minute ago. It does surprise me. There's obviously 4 teams that go down every year, so that is quite a shocking statistic, isn't it? Really, Accrington aren't going to change their model that's been so successful in terms of they're not going to overspend. I mean, Andy Holt's been very vocal, and he's great on Twitter to sort of give insight into how it all works, particularly at that level. So they were punching above their weight, being in the top half probably of League Two, let alone running away and winning it. But it just shows how much you can do when you've got a good manager, canny investment. That word momentum, which not everyone likes. But yeah, there is an element of that, and they're hard to beat, weren't they? So they haven't done too much business so far, but I think they re-signed Sean McConville on a new contract. Big deal. They
still got Billy Key as well, which is
and Billy Key is a good shout. I think they lost the goalkeeper to Peterborough, that we'll see about that. But generally, the squad's pretty much the same, but they haven't added too much to it. But I don't know, a difference between League Two and League One, a lot of it can be down to those cliched things like team spirit and how much they get along and all that kind of stuff. So there's no reason not to think that wouldn't continue. And bear in mind, was it the season before last where they were around near the bottom at Christmas? So again, long season. Wickham, very similar story, really. But they seem to be persevering with the Dad's Army, like Notts County.
Squad. I mean, if you look down the list of their squad and the ages, it's absolutely unbelievable.
I know.
Most of them are older than Ainsworth.
I did an interview with Matt Bloomfield back end of the season. Just signed 2-year contracts, like 34. They're like 400 appearances. So
fast pay.
But I mean, it just works for them, doesn't it? And I wonder if AFC Wimbledon, looking back, Neil Ardley, I mean, they're still in the division, so maybe not, but Bayo Akinfenwa has clearly proved over the last couple of years to be an absolute massive in every sense of the word,
huge
asset for in League Two. And I don't really, based on what the evidence you've just given about the fact that no one has been relegated from it, there's not a huge difference clearly between the two. So he could go on and do pretty well. In terms of the ones that I think could be in trouble, again, like the bottom 14 of the Premier League, someone gets themselves in trouble and they could find themselves doing a West Brom, and it's a very similar kind of thing here. I do again look at AFC Wimbledon because a bit like Accrington, I think they've been punching above their weight. Neil Ardley's done a very good job. Goals were a problem last year. They did enough to stay up. They've gone for James Hansen, who perhaps is a similar player to Akinfenwa or Tom Elliott before then, which they maybe didn't have last year.
I think James Hansen in 2015 would be a great signing. But it's been, he went to Bury on loan last season.
Bit of a gamble, so it depends whether he can sort of do that kind of physical side of things still, but I slightly worry about him. Walsall again changed the manager back end of last season. We talked about Ern Oztumer. I can't admit, Professor's watching them every week live, and sometimes you get those players that do seem to be just on the highlights reel. You think, wow, they're amazing, and maybe they don't do as much as you think in the game. But nonetheless, if you look at his stats, he did still score a lot of goals and wonder goals. So you do wonder if that will have an impact. And I don't really think Blackpool are going to go down because I think Gary Bowyer is such a solid manager. But it's always permanently in crisis. Generally, there always seems to be one decision away from it having a complete nightmare, and he has lost some key players in, as I said before, Robertson and Vassell to Rotherham, who were centre back and centre forward. So maybe a bit of room for manoeuvre there.
So as we said, they're the ones we're looking at, AFC Wimbledon, just a shade over 5-2, and you say you think Blackpool will just about be okay. Anyone kind of further? Do you think bigger prices down here? We're looking at the likes of Bristol Rovers at 15-2, Plymouth at 15-2. Obviously, we're bottom in November and then recovered to go up. Or do you think these guys should all be safe?
I don't really fear for them because I really rate the managers. I think Derek Adams is. I was kind of Paul Hurst was a great choice for Ipswich and really deserved it, but if it hadn't gone for him, I think he wouldn't have been a bad shout. He's not exactly he's quite what's the word? He's quite straight faced. Doesn't really give that much away, but I think he's really proved himself at this level. Not only getting Plymouth up from League Two the year after they sort of lost in the playoff final, lost a lot of their players, basically had to do the whole squad again. Took them up, and then as you say, last season took them from a real sort of serious situation into almost making the playoffs.
Yeah.
So I think in him, over that course of time, when you look at him, particularly from a sort of betting point of view, I think he's proved a very, very safe pair of hands. Fine. I'd only worry if he moved on. And I think same can be said for Darryl Clark. I mean, he's I think these guys are working against. There's a reason why they're lower down in the odds because of the squads they have, perhaps, and the place. Not, even though I love Bristol, it's not a lot of players don't go down that way, particularly to Plymouth.
Of course. But
I think just based on their experience, I'd fancy them to be okay.
So looking at towards the favourites there, Wolves sort of the one team that I also think have a difficult season ahead of them. Dean Keats came in, a bit of a club legend as a player. Not sure he's quite cut out for the job as a manager, and it was pretty desperate at the back end of last season, and they've been struggling for a while now. So they're a team and they're 2-1 best price. They're a team I'm looking at maybe to get against next season. Top goal scorer now, and no surprise to see who's the favourite in the betting. Brett Pitman is 8-1 favourite. Charlie Wyke of Bradford, will he still be there next season? We don't know yet, but he is 12-1. Mm-hmm. Lyle Taylor, who's moved across from AFC Wimbledon to Charlton, 14-1. Danny Hilton, an absolute nuisance for Luton, 16-1. Jason Cummings, 16-1. Kiefer Moore and Tom Bradshaw, both set to start up front for Barnsley, you'd have thought, together, 16-1. John Marquis, 25-1. Liam Boyce, 25-1, who you've already mentioned.
Yeah, I quite fancy him for the reasons I mentioned. You look at someone like Kiefer Moore, he has, apart from that spell where he was on fire, he's never been particularly prolific. But if Barnsley can, but they have a very particular way of playing. Where did he leave from again? He left Rotherham. Rotherham. At that time, they had a very, very specific, and you could see because when Michael Smith came in, it was just basically exactly. And it wasn't like he was prolific before. No. So I'm not so sure. Unless they're going to play a very similar way, I would go for him. Jason, I wouldn't. Jason Cummings is someone who came down from Scotland with a lot of buzz around him. A lot of people thought he could really do things in England. Hasn't worked out so far at Forest, which he's obviously come down on loan from. They're obviously doing all their business. So it's not a surprise that he moved on loan. I still think it's quite a coup for Peterborough to get him. Whether he's physical enough for England, it's something maybe he's needed to work on. But if he is going to play every week, he might not be a bad shout. I mean, remember he did score, I think, against Newcastle in the League Cup.
Peterborough is such a hotbed for strikers and goals. You see so many people going there, not very prolific, and then playing
exactly. Marriott, big prime example, isn't he? And there are more than that. Pitman's a solid shout. How old is he now? Is he what's about 32?
Must be 32, maybe? Yeah.
But he's someone that has risen up the ranks and just nothing seems to faze him because every time he's one of those classic players where I'm sure people around him, not his close allies, but people were saying, well, you can't do this at this level. Now you can't do it at this level, and he's always proved them wrong. So there's no reason not to think that he would be a solid shout every week.
You can probably also give him 7 penalties now at the beginning of the season.
That's a key point, And then talking on key points, Billy Key as well is someone who's defied the odds, really. Someone who, as quite famously now, was very close to jacking it in altogether and working with his dad in construction, and went back to Accrington and rediscovered his love for the game. And in John Coleman and Andy Holt again, they seem to have a great relationship if you know him, but also from social media it's clear. He's again a player he's at the right club that gets the best out of him, and based on what we were saying before about the difference or the lack of difference between League Two and League One, there's no reason not to think he couldn't continue his scoring spree. Yeah,
and with Caden Jackson being linked to a move away, you can be sure that Billy Key will be starting up front. He's not going to be going anywhere. And if, like Tom and I, you do think that Accrington are going to be fine next season, then I think Key is a very, very smart move. And he is 35-1 with 188 bet. A few goal scorer markets. So I think that the Boyce at 25s, Billy Key at 35s, and Brett Pitman at 8 are probably the three we're looking at the most there. And Sunderland fans, we're not sure the title's quite yours yet, let's just say that.